Okay, welcome back, class. And keeping with the same theme of biological anthropology, we now get to talk about hominids. So, um, I'll go ahead and give you some definitions. Fossils. The process of fossilization happens when hard tissues like bone and teeth turn to stone. Some fossils, trace fossils, are impressions of softer tissues like organs, skin, feathers on stones. Also, knowing that relative dating is a technique that provides a rough estimate of the age of the fossil or artifact or archaeological feature related to other fossils, rocks, artifacts, or features. Um, Absolute dating or chronometric dating is any dating method that determines an age of a fossil, rock, artifact, or archaeological feature on some specific time scale. So, how do we study ancient primates and human origins? Our primary line of evidence comes from fossils, bones, and harder tissues that have become stone. Trace fossils, not very many of them happen because the organs and such end up rotting away. There are definitely two forms of dating. Relative dating um, is going to the sidelines anymore because we do have radiocarbon dating, and that is becoming really good. Methods of excavation and dating selected based on the type of artifact as well as the site. So, ancestral humans, the discovery of Australopithecus sediba and Homo naldi. Small odds of finding these new species, very small. So, paleoanthropologists study fossilized remains of ancient humanoids to shed light on their biological and behavioral evolution. Advances in genomic science and technology have had a major influence on this field. So, let's look at what we can find. When, where, and how did our human ancestors emerge, and under what conditions did modern humans emerge? Um, the fossil records show that the genus which we belong to, Homo, emerged about 2 million years ago and began to diversify between 1.8 million and 300,000 years ago, exhibiting a growing humanness in our ancestors. So let's kind of look at our ancestors. Who are the earliest possible ancestors? There are two key issues when trying to decide that. So, what is our evolutionary relationship to other apes? How does the relationship affect how we view and name certain fossils found between 6 to 1 millennia ago, years ago? So, all great apes and humans are placed together in Hominida, a family of primates that includes humans and their ancestors. This has two subfamilies, the Panagia and the Homonia. So the Asian-derived subfamilies, this includes orangutan, and then the African subfamily includes humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas. Homonia is the tribe to which humans and our direct ancestors belong. All hominins are hominins, but only some hominins are homininins, modern humans, and our direct lineage. So, Unique traits of hominins. The modification in the lower back, as well as the upper arms, backbone, make us capable of bipedal locomotion. The foramen magnum is this beautiful hole that sits right about there. Think of a picture of a skull, and I will put up a picture of a skull right after this PowerPoint that shows it a little bit better. But the foramen magnum is the hole through which the spinal cord goes up into the brain cavity of the skull. And the placement of this does definitely help as far as being able to be bipedal. We have it in the center of our skull, while most other animals have it more 90 degrees farther up. So I will share a photo with that in there as a link. So jaw modifications as well as smaller canines are very important because we don't need the huge canines since we are bipedal and have different locomotion needs. So for placing foramen magnum supports bipedalism, that's what I said before. Also the stabilizing pelvis, you'll notice if you look at the pelvis itself, for humans and humanoid ancestors in general, they tend to be more compact as well as wider. This, along with the connection here, and I'm not going to bore you with the anatomical names, but the head of this bone, the femur, locks in to the hip bone at such an angle that it makes it so that bipedalism is easier. You also have the knees, which kind of go in when standing straight up. And then the arch in the foot and phalanges. So, hominid fossil evidence. So fossil evidence of ancestral hominins comes from Africa during the end of the Miocene. Late Miocene fossils were undoubtedly hominin. That is still kind of debatable. The study of the morphological differences in fossils often results in taxonomic designations through their differences. The Miocene, it was between 22 to 5.3 million years ago. And then we had the Pliocene, which is between 5.3 and 2.5 million years ago, and the Pleistocene, 2.5 million years ago to 11,500 years ago. So, and there are numerous identifiable hominins emerging during the Pliocene and Paleocene. Evolutionary relationship between these and earlier Miocene hominids remain unclear to some degree. You have the Australopithecus as well as Paranthropus and Homo are the different major genus. So, most researchers hypothesize that human lineage emerged from the Australopithecine. So, and this is Australopithecine Ammonensis. So a span of over 2 million years in the fossil record. So they have been around and were around for a very long time. They stand between 1.2 and 1.4 meters tall. Fairly high degree of sexual dimorphism, which means sexual dimorphism is where males are larger than females. So, and they were supposedly glacial. They had a relatively large brains and gripping hands and may have processed food as early as 3.3 million years ago. So before that, we really see scavengers for the hominins. Arm length suggests that they were partially arboreal, though they had bipedal structures. Genus Paranthropus. This is a cluster of hominin fossils dating from 2.7 to 1 million years ago, and they differ from Australopithecines as they had larger brains and broader dish-shaped faces, with smaller foreheads and flared cheekbones. They also have a very pronounced sagittal crest. And this right here is the sagittal crest. It is what muscles attach to. So they had very large jaw muscles. They were bipedal. They tended to be 1.3 to 1.4 meters in height. Probably lived in open woodlands or savanna landscapes and were almost certainly tool users. So, they did have large molar teeth relative to their body size, which shows that they did tend to eat a lot of fauna, or floral rather than fauna, or plants. Okay, the genus Homo, this emerged from one Australopithecine lineage about 3 to 2 million years ago. Most hominin fossils younger than about 1.8 million years ago are considered to be a part of the Homo genus. There's a large cranial capacity, and they were competent bipeds. And so they mostly walked upright. That's one of the big things. They also made and used stone tools called the Olduvai tools. However, there's a disagreement that persists about how many species they actually represent, or even if some earlier cases of members of Homo or Australopithecine. Olduvai tools are rocks that were modified to produce sharp flakes and edge cutters. The missing link. Is one of these earlier species the missing link? Most definitely no. Deciding which one is impossible. The fossil record is very much incomplete. We are still finding new species. Evolutionary theory definitely rejects a link. What we do have are many missing links. So paleoanthropologists look for an evolutionary relationship between the existing hominins that we know of. So paleoanthropologists are still working through our most direct ancestor is. What did walking on two legs and having a big brain mean for early hominins? Bipedalism is one of the most determining traits of hominins. There's a direct link between our emergence and the separation of apes. So there's a difference between bipedal, allowing anatomy that still enables the use of four limbs for movement and climbing, and bipedal enforcing anatomy as modern humans have. This allows for the increased brain size, which is very significant. It enables us to acquire a degree of social complexity, and our tool use ends up becoming more refined. So, um, no. Bipedalism is a consequence of multiple independent selections. It most definitely aids in carrying objects. It is very beneficial with hunting. We're able to do different types of movement as well as carry weapons. It allows for upright reaching. It allows us to be more vigilant and visually survey the area. It also aids in long distance walking as well as running, and helps to aid in heat regulation. However, there's no single explanation to why bipedalism. Um, so, increased cranial capacity. This increased cranial capacity helped allow for a greater brain power, increased metabolic cost for the body, though. Increased meat consumption helped mean the added energy cost. However, most primates, whether human or not, do end up eating meat. And that is because of our increased cranial capacity. So there are abundance and relatively ease of gathering roots, tubers, nuts, and fatty fruits as a source of high quality of nutrition made them a stable element of the Homo diet. By cultural evolution and early humans, the hypothesis is that bipedalism and the increasing brain power with the associated changes in diets, tool use, and social relations contribute to the evolutionary changes. This led to later forms of Homo. If true, this hypothesis points to something powerful and new, the interaction of biology and culture through evolution to meet selective challenges. So, who were the first humans and where did they live? During the Paleocene epoch, our lineage began to spread out of Africa. Homo erectus appeared about 1.8 million years ago, had human-like body proportions and height, lived on ground as obligatory bipeds, cared for their young as well as their weak, which is pretty awesome, made and used stone tools, controlled fire, and may have had some kind of proto-language. Homo erectus looks a lot, actually it looks quite a bit like us, but they had thicker bones, they were more robust skeletons, and differently shaped craniums. Some fossils also had a sagittal keel. They are found throughout Africa, Europe, India, Indonesia, and China. The taxonomic ordering of Homo erectus is unresolved because there is a huge debate. I also think that there is a pygmy form of Homo erectus, and that's one of the debates that continues on whether it is its own species or not. It's long been assumed that we evolved out of Homo habilis to Homo erectus. The recent finds increasingly say that Homo habilis was actually in coexistence with Homo erectus, so they're not sure that actually is the case. There's a sparse nature of fossil records, and new findings and evidence challenge existing interpretations. So, archaic humans. Um, Homo sapiens came around about 500,000 years ago, and change in morphology and material culture suggests the emergence of one or more new varieties of Homo. They're known for making more refined and specialized tools. Individuals with these traits are referred to as archaic humans. The brow ridge became smaller and more separate. There's a reduced post-orbital construction and an indentation of the side of the cranium between the eyes. So archaic Homo sapiens are a broad category that assumes that we ourselves evolved directly out of this group. So it's a very good possibility it'll end up changing at some point. But for now, archaic humans, anthropologists have classified archaic humans into one of two ways. All archaic human sapiens. They're also separated into two different species, Homo heidelbergensis and Homo neanderthalis. The oldest archaic human specimens are found in Africa, geographically spread throughout Africa, including the Middle East, Mediterranean, Eastern Asia, Siberia, and Eastern and Western Europe. Putting Homo neanderthalis within the Homo genus is something that has happened pretty recently. It was considered to be its own genus when I was going for my undergrad, so that was about 8-9 years ago. Neanderthals and Denisovans may have been similarly robust, but the sparseness of skeletal evidence prevents any morphological description. Most of what we know about them comes from analyzing mitochondrial DNA. So there's been a lot of attention that has been directed to the fossils of Homo neanderthal, specifically because they date from about 300,000 to 30,000 years ago. They're most definitely stockier than modern humans, but similar to height and weight. Discovery of the archaic humans dating 41,000 years ago in Denisov caves added new evidence and interest. So there was most definitely a cohabitation going on between the Homo neanderthals as well as the Homo sapiens. It's also thought that Homo erectus was around the same time, and there might be some overlapping between the three. Interrelations of the three species. Strong fossil evidence suggests that Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans overlapped for about 10,000 years or so. The relationship among these varieties of Homo has grown more complicated and intriguing with technological innovations and ancient human genomics. Anatomically modern humans. This happened between 200,000 and 25,000 years ago. Archaic features in the fossil record definitely changed. There was a change in the morphology and a dramatic change in type and complexity of tools and other material cultures, as well as behavior. Today, all anthropologists agree that there's only one human species that remains, and all humans today belong to the same subspecies of Homo. Same species, only one species. Very important. Language as we know it is probably appeared with anatomically modern humanoids. If they're looking for different tracers, seeing if we can try to figure out whether or not this is true, but so far it's what we know. 35,000 to 12,000 years ago, there may have been at least 2 species of humans. So, where did we originate? We definitely have a couple different models. So, the recent African origin model, the multi-regional evolutionary model, and the multiple dispersion model. So the recent African origin model proposes that modern humans arose in a new species in Africa between 200,000 and 180,000 years ago during the Late Pliocene. The multi-regional evolution model proposes that modern humans are only the most recent version of a single species of Homo sapien, and that had been in Africa, Asia, and Europe for nearly 2 million years. However, the multiple dispersal model argues that modern humans left Africa in multiple waves, and the edge out the other gives the current fossil and DNA evidence. This model, the initial movement out of Africa started happening approximately 1.8 million years ago. This one is currently the strongest. Homo spread around western, central, and southern Eurasia, with a back and forth gene flow across Africa and Eurasia. Other dispersal patterns include 800,000 to 400,000 years ago influenced Eurasian populations through interbreeding, affecting the genetic patterns in the genus Homo. 150,000 to 800,000 years ago, also affecting genetic patterns in the genus Homo. 60,000 years ago, influencing the genetic pattern of Central Eurasian and African populations. 50,000 years ago, populations moved into Northern Eurasia, Australia, and the Pacific Islands, and eventually Americas. 15,000 years ago, through migration. The multi-dispersal model predicts that African populations would have forcefully and recurrent effects on the genetic characteristics of humans over the past 1.7 million years, and that the gene flow would be an important recurrent dynamic within living groups closer to each other, most affected by that flow of genes. How do we know if the first humans were cultural beings, and what role did they have in cultural play to their evolution? Cultural capacity of hominins emerged over a long time and interacted with biological to meet selective demands through biocultural evolution. Humans approach environmental challenges with more than just their hands and teeth during the Paleolithic era. So, beginning with Homo erectus, we know that culture played a greater role in the lives than earlier hominins because diets changed. We can tell that by looking at the samples of the bones and fossils. The tools definitely changed. Use of fire, that also changed. We started cooking our food, which allows for different types of nutrition to happen. Cooperative behaviors most definitely increased. So their diet changed. The increase in brain and body size met higher metabolic rates, requiring more and higher quality food. Their tools changed because early homos used Olduvai tools, allowing processing of animals and plants. About 1.6 to 1.4 million years ago, Acastilian tools with better edges and different styles appeared in the fossil records. They used fire, which enabled the consumption of a wider variety of food and higher energy return on the foods that we're eating, marking the beginning of cooking. So, material culture and behavior of archaic humans. Evidence for archaic human material culture and behavior includes a lot of different things, but the evidence for this material culture and behavior comes from Neanderthal sites dating from 300,000 to 50,000 years ago. Leviticus tool-making techniques yield higher quality blades capable of many more uses. And so all of the changes gave archaic humans improved access to nutrition and new pressures on the body to process the richer foods. So you most definitely see organized hunting groups, fire control, shelters made of possible wood and hide, and new tool making technologies and techniques. So, a significance of culture. We cannot say with any certainty when it appeared. However, human activities based on social interdependency and intensive cooperation, which depends on communication. Cultural means allowing for group memory, establishing patterns, way of doing things, and metaphysical thought. By 50,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans created images that some scholars interpret as art. But we definitely have to be careful about using present-day views and experiences to interpret the artistic expression, because there are some dilemmas involving understanding of the production and significance of this ancient art. So, and one thing I will do is after this, I have a couple different slideshows that show all of the different Homo sapiens or hominins and ancient ancestors of Homo sapiens that you all are more than welcome to look through. I will not be narrating it, but if you click the notes portion, you'll be able to pull up my notes on the slides as well. Okay. Make sure you read over the chapter selection and know that we did evolve from a decent line of different hominins and the great apes. So definitely look at the photo involving the foramen magnum. Try to look at the PowerPoints. I know you don't really have to, so why do it? But it'll give you more information, which will definitely help. And then you can go on to doing your discussion posts and quiz. And I will see you in a little bit for Chapter 7.